Welcome to another episode of InRange. This is another in the Practical Shooting 101 series, where we hope to provide information that gets you going with the best options and choices for whatever your needs are. And this one is inspired by a conversation I've seen going on, frankly, for years, but more so due to a video we dropped recently on the channel from my friend Deviant Olaf, in which he did an interesting experiment of buying kind of the cheapest, lowest cost possible red dot light and laser and test firing it on a shotgun to see if it would fail. Surprisingly, they didn't. Doesn't mean you should buy the cheapest possible options, but it was curious to see how well those could stand up. But in the comment section, and it reminded me of this conversation that's now gone on for a long time, there were a lot of people putting up opposition to the idea of a red dot on a shotgun. And I find this so curious, and I think it kind of falls back into the paradigm of how people think of shotguns, especially people, no offense to anyone watching, because this isn't specifically about you, but to anyone who hasn't done real practical shooting with a shotgun. When I say practical shooting, I talk about competition, I talk about training for self-defense scenarios, and I talk about hunting as well. All of those are practical applications of a shotgun. And just like with a rifle, which we have no concerns anymore about having a red dot on it. In fact, people think a rifle without a red dot on it or something like that is naked nowadays for the most part. And we're at the point now where people finally accept that red dots on pistols are an enhancement for the most part. Of course, not always, but for the most part, red dots on pistols are a significant enhancement. Why people would think that a red dot wouldn't also be a significant enhancement on a shotgun? It provides all the same advantages. Both eyes open, with a good quality one, generally parallax free, works in low light conditions, provides sometimes an option of different types of reticles. And when I say parallax free, if the dot's pretty much anywhere in view and on the target, you can press the trigger and more likely hit what you're aiming at. None of which can be done with a traditional standard bead, like we see on this Maverick 88. And so why do we see this consternation about red dots on shotguns? Well, I think this comes back to, well, you only use shotguns at close range. Shotguns have a pattern and don't have to be aimed. And yes, they do have a pattern, but they do need to be aimed. A pattern of buckshot or a pattern of birdshot has a center to that, and you want that center of that pattern to be over the target, whatever that target may be. And so a bead works at relatively close ranges. Rifle-style sights, which you see on this old Saiga here, also help significantly. Also, I see consternation about rifle sights on shotguns too, which is weird. This is a giant ghost ring with a standard front post, and it works quite well. But when it comes down to it, the red dot provides everything and all the advantages we talk about for those other guns, but on a shotgun. In fact, we don't have to look any further than red dots being good for the practical application of shotguns than turkey hunters. Now, you may or may not be a hunter or be okay with hunting, but the reality is turkey hunting typically is done stealthily and at longer distances than you would normally traditionally consider firing a shotgun, with usually 3-inch magnum or tungsten loads and really high quality ammunition to keep the pattern tight. But what that means is a tight pattern has to be aimed. You don't just point it at something and pull the trigger and hope for the best. You want that pattern to be centered over what you're trying to hit. And in this case, it would typically be a turkey's head, which is a small target at distance. Another thing that's a small target at distance would be a man-sized target, whether in some terrible self-defense scenario or just competition shooting. And the reality is, with good quality slugs, even out of a traditional smoothbore shotgun, a properly zeroed red dot shotgun can hit a man-sized target out to 200 yards. Now, maybe even further, but 200 yards feels to me like the limit of that. But 200 yards is possible. 100 yards is not even a problem. And then, of course, within that, 50 yards, etc., is a piece of cake.
Hit! 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 Hit!
None of which is really very viable with a bead. I'm not saying you can't make a hit with a bead, but you will be most likely far better off with a red dot than you were a bead. And then we see people say, well, you don't need it for wing shooting, for trap, skeet, clays, or even just dove and quail. but the same advantages still apply. Both eyes open, better situational awareness, meaning that you can keep track on a moving target easier than you could if you have to focus on a bead. You superimpose this dot that's floating out in front of you and press the trigger. Again, the advantage of a red dot over just a bead, and still an advantage over rifle style sights on top of that. So I think in general, the argument against red dots on shotguns come frankly from people that do not understand, nor have they tried to use shotguns in these practical applications, and they're working on old, frankly erroneous shotgun concepts and constructs that don't apply. The shotgun may very well be the most versatile firearm you could keep in your collection. It can do hunting, it can do birdshot, it can do buckshot, it can do slugs. With a properly zeroed sight, it can do slugs out to 200 yards with reasonably good quality ammunition. There's really nothing else you're going to have in your inventory that can do all of those things with that level of versatility. And so this shotgun in front of me is the topic of a future apocalyptic shotgun design that I'm working on. We'll talk about that later. But it's always, apocalypse and thinking about these types of things are frankly more real than we'd like lately, but are thought experiments that help us design better solutions. Hopefully we never have to actually test them out. But when I think of an apocalyptic scenario, the shotgun really, to me, comes to mind as the best first choice that I would make for all the reasons I said before. Hunting, self-defense, practical applications, close range, distance, and frankly, properly loaded buckshot at close range is a devastating round. So, this isn't going to go into which red dots are best or why. This is strictly a discussion about why red dots make sense on shotguns, why, if you are considering some sort of practical application firearm, that a 12 gauge is still a viable choice, and the scenarios in which you may consider needing to use it, such as apocalyptic, hunting, competition, self-defense. The shotgun can do all of that. It's not to say that other guns can't do some of those things better. An AR-15 is obviously better for distance. You could shoot that thing out to 600 yards. You can shoot precision shots more so than you could even with a red dot on a shotgun. But you're probably not going to go dove hunting with an AR-15 should you need to, etc., etc. So I hope this helps explain why red dots make sense on shotguns, and that if you were in the mindset that it didn't make sense, maybe this helped make you consider that a little differently. And if you have had your mind changed about this, consider watching the channel further. We're going to have some more videos on this topic. But I hope that you'll not just regurgitate old school, frankly, FUD type information about red dots to shotguns. We've already seen people do this about rifles. We've already seen people say this about pistols. And it's time now to realize that red dots are a force multiplying technology on pretty much any firearm you can put them on, shotguns included. Thank you for watching. If you like this sort of content, please consider supporting us on Patreon. This is a proactively demonetized channel. We make no money off YouTube, no ad revenue. The algorithm frequently blacklists us and shadow bans us more than anything. People are even click subscribe, hit the bell. You may not see a notification about us, but if you're on Patreon, you'll definitely see an update about our new videos. And you're also helping keep this alternative voice in the firearms community alive. Being that we are supported only by viewers like you, the NPR model, I like to say, I'd like to thank all of you who've done that. You've kept us going now for 10 years, and hopefully you can keep us going for another 10. Literally every dollar counts. Enough people putting in a couple dollars in the pot makes a big difference on what we can do with this channel, with this voice, and what we're trying to put into the community. If you can't, I understand money is not infinite. Again, subscribe, hit the bell. Don't know if that'll work, but the other thing you can do is if you found this video useful, or you want to share this with your friend that thinks that red dots have no place on a shotgun, please do so. You can be the organic algorithm to the one that YouTube won't help us out with. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.